Peter.J at Ulundi that this had happened. And Peter.J decides, this is interesting because I'm being invaded in 3 columns, but this column straight away has launched this attack. Not only has it launched an attack, it's attacked one of my personal favourites, so it's particularly targeting, as we might say now, the important men in my regime. If you look at sort of events in the Middle East recently, the idea of targeting individuals who support the ruling administration and all the rest of it is quite a contemporary, modern one, and it certainly seemed to Peter.J that this is what the British were doing. He's also looking at the fact that this column has so many African auxiliaries with it who are traditional enemies of the Zulus, and I am convinced that he saw regime change as being amongst the British sort of objectives with this particular column, because they're coming in, they're being very aggressive, they're attacking his particular followers, and they appear to have people with them who might just be set up to replace his administration should the British win the war. So, whereas the British have retired with a sense of complacency from this action, the Zulus then think, no, this is the column that we really need to have a go at. And the king collects his entire army together, something like 25,000 men, at Ondini, and he decides, I'm going to direct it then against this particular column. Other columns elsewhere in the country, I'll send little detachments down to harass them, to mask it so they don't know what's going on, and I'll focus my response against this centre column. So we then have a situation by about the 18th or 19th of January 1879 where the British think everything's going their way, but they have provoked this whirlwind which is descending unknown upon them to come down and oppose them. Now, Chelmsford sits at Rorke's Drift for several days. It pours with rain. Pete, if you're listening to that one, pours with rain when you're intense, not comfortable. Certainly Lord
Bear that in mind.
Lord Chelmsford's troops struggled with that. It took him about a week to get the road ahead of him prepared enough to get his column to advance down it. And on the 20th of January he advances to this rocky hill, nubbin. It's not quite a mountain, it's this strange atmospheric, peculiar place called Isantroana. There it is dominating the painting of the events that took place there. He arrives there on the 20th of January 1879. By the time he gets there, his intelligence department is receiving reports that the Zulus are coming and are coming to attack him. The interesting thing is about that, he thinks, great, bring it on, we'll resolve this as quickly as possible, I'm sure to win any subsequent battle, let's not drag it out as quickly as possible. So the irony is that by the time you get to the 20th of January, where the two armies are beginning to group towards each other from opposite directions, both sides, or particularly the British, are looking for that coming conflict. They're not trying to avoid it, they think it's going to work in their favour, and it'll be a big plus. Now, the battlefield of Isantroana, as it subsequently becomes, has been picked over endlessly at the time and ever since in terms of its suitability as a military campsite. Was it a good campsite? Was it a bad campsite? Could you defend any British position there? The fact is, actually, it's as good as any in the region. If you had an ideal choice, no, you probably wouldn't have put a camp there, but you don't have an ideal choice. You're invading an enemy country. You've got very limited routes of access. You need water, you need wood for your fires and drink for your animals and men and all the rest of it. Isantroana, from the foot of the mountain, looks out about 12 miles towards the enemy country, and it's reasonably open and clear. There's quite a good view ahead towards the enemy, so it's as good as anywhere, and this big camp was laid out at the foot of the mountain. But Chelmsford was worried about a certain range of hills lying off to his front right. He thought, well, maybe if the Zulus get in there, it would be difficult to get them out. So the day after he arrives, he sends a big patrol out into those hills to scour around looking for signs of the enemies. Now, as we just run through the battle, yeah, okay, still got some time to do it, fine, yeah. I will just flag up, particularly for those of you who like to pick over these things, some of the moments where I think the course of events is shaped at a particular turning point. And really when you're looking at this and trying to work out what happened and why it happened the way that it happened, you need to understand what was in people's minds at those particular crucial moments, because their decisions are based on the information available to them at that point. And several times, if a decision had been made differently, it would have spun events off in a different direction. But it wasn't, and usually when you pick it over, there were good reasons why decisions were made as they were at that particular moment. So Chelmsford sends his scouts off into this range of hills. Late on the evening of the 21st, when they're about 12 miles away from Isandlwana, when they were actually due to turn around and march back to the camp and report to Lord Chelmsford what they've seen, these scouts run into some Zulus in the hills. When one's looking at Lord Chelmsford and his failings and all the rest of it, I'm always recalled to Napoleon's sort of maxim about generals. Somebody said to Napoleon, "Napoleon, what is it that you seek in your generals?" And he thought about it for a minute and said that they be lucky. And I think one of the threads when you're looking at poor old Lord Chelmsford is he's not a particularly lucky man. There are a number of incidents throughout this whole saga here, and cumulatively they turn out to be the kind of iceberg that sinks the Titanic. They're not necessarily major problems in their own right, but this encounter takes place 12 miles away from Isandlwana in the growing dusk. What are you going to do at that point if you were in command of those scouts? You're supposed to return and report to Lord Chelmsford. But actually it's late. If you turn round and come back now at that time of night, you're going to have the Zulus behind you in your rear. You're also, by the time you're going to get back, you're going to have broken off contact. You're not going to know where those Zulus have gone. Any information that you've gathered that might be useful is now going to be lost because they're going to have moved off in the darkness. What are you going to tell the general? Well, when we set out from there 4 hours ago, they were over there, but God knows where they've gone now. So the chap in command of those scouts decides, okay, compromise, I'm going to stay here overnight. I can keep an eye on the Zulus, see if they're still there in the morning, but I'm going to send a message back to Lord Chelmsford now, telling him exactly what we found. So a messenger rides back 12 miles through the open veldt at night, actually through potentially hostile territory, arrives back at the British camp at the foot of this mountain, isn't shot by his own sentries as he gets there, as he probably would have been later in the war when the sentries were a lot more jumpy after this particular sequence of events. Gets there, reports to the office headquarters, column headquarters. Staff officer goes and wakes Lord Chelmsford. Oh. Sir?
I'll put it outside. I'm so sorry, I don't know what to do with it.
Mine does the same as well, don't worry.
There's a bucket of water.
No way.
Sorry, you can hit it with this. So Lord Chelmsford is woken up at about 2:30 in the morning, actually, as it happens, by his staff officer saying, "Sir, got a report from the scouts. Zulus are 12 miles away in the hills." Now, we've had one decision that has set in motion the chain of events. By staying out in the hills, the man commanding those scouts almost demands a response from Lord Chelmsford and actually limits the responses that Lord Chelmsford is able to give. When Chelmsford's woken up in his tent, 2:30 in the morning, probably quite cool, it'd been a very hot day, but no doubt the temperature would have dropped at night. I think he wore a nightcap to bed at night, so he's sitting on the end of his collapsible bed in his nightcap, reading by candlelight this dispatch. His options are somewhat limited by the fact that his commander of scouts says, "I'm going to stay out there, I'm not coming back tonight. I would request support as early as possible," he says. So Chelmsford thinks, well, what should I do? Can I abandon this guy to the Zulus? Actually, no, because I've been looking for this point of contact. Now, we know, right now. Galloper's not taken that long to come back, certainly got back much quicker than marching men would have done. A couple of hours ago, that's where they were. They're out there, my scouts still watching the Zulu movements off in the darkness. I know where they are now. Now is my moment to go out and attack them. And he decides what he's going to do. He's going to take half his force out of the camp at Isandlwana and he's going to march out into those hills and he's going to support his scouts and he's going to get there, he reckons, about dawn the following morning, and then he's going to give the Zulus a hell of a surprise. This is the moment he's been waiting for. He is thinking to himself in the small dark hours early on the morning of Wednesday the 22nd of January, actually, I've just been given a get out of jail free card here because I know where they are. and they're not going to be expecting me to react this quickly. So at the time, like so many great events in history which go horribly, horribly wrong subsequently, it seemed a damn good idea to split his forces at that point. If you think about it, he's got 3,000 men, but he's got 200 and something ox wagons.